clicking through.
There we go. So we have the analytics instrumentation office hours on the 4th of December, and we have like half of the team here today because we wanted to talk about what to do with Redis keys for existing metrics as we start to move them over to internal events. Yeah, Basti, do you want to go with what you put in the agenda?
I just want to acknowledge that first. It seems like if I want to bring most of the team together, I just need to start talking about Redis migrations, and everyone appears. But I remember that. So I wanted to bring this up and also talk about this in sync, because we had multiple longer discussions in different issues, and around migrations and how do we move from, like, how do we migrate existing events and metrics to the new internal event system, and I want to somehow make sure that we kind of discuss it as this migration as a topic in one place, maybe also together, and then we can still decide that all of these different places are separate problems and we want to tackle them in separate ways or in completely unrelated ways. But at least then that's a conscious decision, because right now it feels like we're making these kind of discussions in different places. There's sometimes different people involved. It's not always the same people. And so there's the risk that we kind of come out with different solutions and then we end up with confusion around, okay, why didn't we like centralize this more or come up with one solution? And maybe just to make sure that everyone has the same context. So again, we are talking about migrations from existing metrics to internal events. And so in this case, that can be Redis total counts, but also Redis HLL unique counters. And somewhat related, maybe even kind of migrating internal events now from previous versions to newer ones. And so far, I think we all agreed that we don't actually want to migrate Redis keys directly. So maybe taking one step back, a problem that we often encounter is that we now in internal events, we have some kind of logic based on the input of the name of an event, which metrics are configured and so on. We want to create some kind of logic which keys in Redis are getting used, right? And this doesn't necessarily 100% correspond to which keys have been previously, or which key has been previously used for a different, for a metric. And so if we want to migrate a metric, an existing Redis HLL metric, an existing Redis total count to the new internal event system, we end up with two choices. Either, or with a choice, or two choices. With we would directly create a Redis migration. So every time we do some kind of metric migration, we create like a real Redis migration, which moves the data from one key, from the old key to the new key. Or we somehow add somewhere the capability to use the old key for some time. And I think a decision that was previously made and that I think we all adhered by so far, which is also based on, I think, some experience that Nico made and others, is that we said, okay, we don't want to do actual key migrations within those metric migration issues, because that's always quite risky. There's things that can go wrong. We had it happen before that, because a Redis key migration, it's, I think, a post deploy script. So it's not really clear when it's going to run. So we had that before, depending on incidents, for example, on production and so on. It might take like even days after a deploy happened until the actual migration is run. And so it's kind of hard to even test and figure out, like, did everything actually work? So there's loads that can go wrong. And so what we always wanted to opt to do is to rather build in some methodology to use old keys, still migrate to internal events, but somewhere we note down, okay, for this specific metric, please don't use the normally computed key, but use some older, like some other key that we noted down somewhere. Does that make sense so far?
I have a question. So why do we need new keys in the internal events compared to old system? I mean, I know from my MR that we need it if we want to add unique property names, but from what I understand, it's also necessary for some other issues.
Yeah, so I think for the one you talk about, where we so until now we have generated a Redis key, so that's for Redis HLL, right? We have generated a Redis key based on the event name, and now we want to allow to track several events with but based on different properties. So we kind of need to fit in the property name into the key somehow. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
So
and so that's one where we kind of need to need to know which one was the default or which one was the. So we have this. We have a bunch of these Redis keys existing now that doesn't have any information about the property name in them. So I think that's kind of one problem. We need to know which one was the default one. Most often the one that is tracking user ID, but we have also other properties being tracked. And then we had a similar thing on what Piotr worked on adding total counts, or starting to migrate total counts, where if we add a new total count metric on with internal events, we auto generate a key path based on the event on the event name. But since we already have counters for all the existing total counters out there, we want to somehow not lose those. We don't want to lose those counters, right? So either we need to migrate the values over, or we need to keep using the old keys even after they're migrated to internal events.
Okay, so in this case, the Redis key generated is different because of stuff like the prefix that we had in the old system? Or? Okay.
Yeah, I think also,
the name
both
is generally different because we have a completely different naming scheme now.
Okay. Okay.
And even if we would have adapted the naming scheme, I think the problem is also, so if you imagine there's, like in the previous system, if there is a place where someone was tracking a total count and a Redis HLL unique count, like they were creating both. In the new system, you should only need like one internal event tracking call, right? That's the whole idea. So you do one internal event tracking call, and the rest is kind of magic that happens through the metric definitions and so on. So you need one. Ideally, you pass in one event name there, but there's no guarantee. Like even if you would have somehow adapted to the system, there's no guarantee that someone was using the same naming, like actual name or something, for an event for the Redis HLL key or for the Redis HLL call and the what you call the total count call.
Redis. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So I think we already covered two places here. Another place that I discovered that could be tricky to migrate. It's a bit different, so there might also be a different solution, but just so that we know about it also. is existing places where we send to both. So there's with both Snowplow and Redis HL. So there's this product analytics tracking concern, and there's also a what's it called? I think places where we actually like just have both calls, one to Snowplow, one to Redis HLL, and the unfortunate thing there is also that the pattern that we have now, where our event name equals the action in Snowplow, which equals which is the main deciding factor for the Redis HLL key, is not the pattern that's used there. I can actually try to visualize this somewhat for myself, so I can try to share that. It's like you see the drawing?
Yes.
So hopefully I didn't. So we have this product analytics tracking concern. So that's something that can be imported in controllers and so on to make it easy to track controller actions. And that has some possibility to send to both destinations, which is used quite a bit to send to both Redis HLL and to Snowplow. And the unfortunate thing there is just if we compare kind of that to our internal events tracking event is, so you have a name, action, and label. So you can already see that you have a name and action, which is different to what we're doing now, where it's name equals action. Our decision to make name equal action is that action is the required property from Snowplow's side. Like when you create a Snowplow event, you always need to provide an action. What's happening now when a product analytics tracking event is fired is that we actually we send the name is sent as the property of the Snowplow event. The action is sent as the action, and the label is sent as the label. At the same time, the name of the event is used for the Redis HLL key. And then on the other side, when we track an event via, like now with the new system, we use the name as the action. And then there's a discussion now, I can also link it, to enable further properties, but that would then directly map property to property and label to label. And so there's also this mismatch. And from my perspective, I think that's another place where we have kind of a bit of a mismatch here. And the thing is, if we want to continue migrating things, and actually, I mean, from an API perspective, these product analytics track event calls would be theoretically comparably easy to migrate because they look always the same. But what I think would make it impossible to migrate those places is if we tell people that with that migration, your Snowplow events are going to look different. Like if every time you migrate something, you need to check if you can rename things, that's not going to be possible. So when we migrate things, we not only, like on the one hand, we want to make sure that things look the same in Redis, or we don't need to directly migrate the Redis keys. At the same time, if there's already an existing Snowplow event, we kind of need to make sure that the Snowplow event continues to look the same. Or alternatively, we need to check in the data warehouse, potentially with the group, if it's safe to rename it or remove some data or something like that, which then kind of, as you can, I guess, all imagine, would blow up the amount of effort that migrations take. If it's always kind of a discussion, if it's not like just okay, just do it. If it's more like okay, can we really do it, and should we rename something, and those kinds of things.
Mm.
All right. So which options do we have to support that?
So maybe just because
Go
I
for it.
looked at both MRs, or rather at kind of the suggestions there, one big difference that we had between how Meow started to implement things in the Redis HTML case, like moving to unique, enabling this uniqueness on multiple properties, versus how Piotr did it, or like it was at least suggested to do it with the total counts, is that in the Meow's case, in the unique properties case, there was a legacy events YAML created, so like a separate file that lists that is kind of supposed to be read to list all the events where we need to use an old key. So it's kind of a separate place where this information is documented, that please use the old key. And I think if I remember correctly, in the total count case, the last thing we agreed upon was to put it into the metric definition, to in the metric definition have some kind of I don't know how it's called now. It's like old Redis key or something like that. Or so
yeah, now it's in both metric definition and event definition. Because the problem is that we need that legacy key when we write to the counter, when internal events framework writes to that Redis key, and then when a service ping payload is generated, we need to read from that key, and putting it only in either metric definition or an event definition would mean that either the instrumentation class needs to find that event definition, or internal events needs to find that particular metric definition, and it's a lot of additional logic which is kind of circumvented by just writing the same thing twice. And I think it's better because it's not really a dynamic value. It's not going to change. So it might save us some work, if that makes sense.
So regardless of how Piotr actually implements it, of like whether this will be the final version or not, it seems like Piotr's use case will cover for the unique properties use case, because what Piotr needs is to define, like from what I understand, it's not enough for you to say that these events are legacy. You also need to say like this is the Redis key, right?
Yeah, right.
So this will definitely cover for the case with the unique properties, because I could also tell that, oh, I guess it's a bit different, because for me it will be per event property pair, we will need a unique key.
But wouldn't you only need the unique keys for the existing ones, the ones that were default?
For the non-internal events, it will be just the event's name. And for internal events, we want to migrate them in the next milestones anyway. So yeah, so it seems like I could use Piotr's system for the events that will stay in the code base. I might need to add something new just for the internal events that will get migrated soon because we can automate it. Oh.
Do you also need to do something about the for the existing Redis HLL metrics? Or can you just leave that alone? I'm not sure I understand what you are. Yeah.
That was exactly
for the existing Redis HLL events and metrics. We will still be reading their old key, but the new keys will be built differently because they need to include the property name. So we will need some logic to make sure that all of these legacy events will go with their old keys. So we either
right.
can.
But that code path is more like if it's an old event, not migrated to internal events or anything, you're still using Redis HLL, then I'll just follow the old code path. Is that right?
We could do it like this, but then we need to keep the old code path. In case we have the Redis keys in the metrics or event definitions, we could just grab the key from there, and we would not need to keep the logic for generating the old Redis keys.
I think more importantly, just why we, because like Mia and me, we also had the same, like the discussion around, okay, do we need to do something about the existing Redis HLL keys? And at least from my understanding, the big thing is if the change with this unique on stuff, if we totally ignore the old Redis HLL stuff and just say, okay, that uses the old code path, we don't care about it, we only care about migrating internal events. What we then essentially do is block the easy migration path from Redis HLL to internal events. Right?
Yes.
Because then, right up until that point, up until we add what Miha is doing. So just to make sure that everyone understands what this is it's kind of it's like adding the property name here to the key. So it's like user ID or something based on what kind of metric we're looking at. So if there's a metric that's unique by user for that specific event, we create a key underscore user ID. If it says unique by project, we do key underscore project ID. So that it becomes possible to kind of create a metric on the same event, create one metric that says unique by user and unique by project. So far, because we weren't doing that, or we're still not doing that because it's not matched in, when migrating an old existing Redis HLL event to internal events, we just need to make sure that the name of the new event equals the key of the old event. And then like migration done. And we're not going to lose any data. We're not going to have any weird things happening. We don't need to migrate any Redis HLL key. Now, when we enable what Miha is currently building, and we don't take care of the Redis HLL, of the old Redis HLL things, that migration path becomes impossible. Because when you
database migration,
you would need a key migration, because when you add something to internal events, even if you use the same name that was previously used for the Redis HLL key, it will add, for example, this in most cases, for example, a key underscore user, and so the key name will change, which means that we either every migration would need to include a Redis migration again, or we need to give people some way of when we tell them how to migrate things, we need to tell them like, okay, please add your event to this legacy list or something. Please, you need to do something specific in the metric definition, or wherever we store the information. We would need to store the information somewhere that, hey, this is a migrated event, so please don't use key underscore user ID, just use key. So don't do the underscore thing. And that way we could keep the migration simple, and then at a later point, to get rid of this storing the information separately, we could do a bulk migration. I think that would probably be the idea. I mean, whatever we decide on how we want to handle this in the long run, we still, at some point, ideally, I guess we still do a Redis migration. It just becomes something that's kind of bulk and happens at once. And we can make sure that it definitely goes right and build in safety nets and so on. And then we can remove that. But that's probably something that happens as soon as we migrate everything, or I don't know, something like that. Does that make sense?
I think it does make sense. I was just wondering if we this legacy list that we talked about adding to. Oh, sorry, I have a coffee machine coughing and mocking. Couldn't we generate that right now? Like for just create it for all metrics. Already, it's a little metrics that are already defined. Is that the approach you went on?
Yes, that's how it looks right now in the MAR.
Okay. Because then anybody migrating it in the future wouldn't need to worry about it, right? Then we would still have the migration path.
You would still need to add their event name into this legacy list when they are migrating.
Oh, Nick was trying to say something.
Yeah, thanks, Nico.
Yeah, see ya.
Thanks for joining.
So what I was proposing is, wouldn't it be possible to add to auto-generate this legacy list right now? Like we have all the metric definitions, and they have events. They have an event section, so couldn't we generate this YAML file now and just put it there? And if anybody wants to change one of these metrics from Redis HLL to internal events, the event would already be in there, and then that would work.
The event would be there, but we would need to add for this event the property that will be tracked now, so that we know that the default property equals to, say, user ID in internal events. So it will still require a change inside this YAML file, but by the person migrating the event. But it will be a change in the code base. They would not need to make a database migration.
Yeah, I think that the problem is that we're missing the information.
Which one is the default property? Is it user ID? Is it project ID? Right. That's true. Yeah.
I mean, I guess we could, for example, per default assume it's user ID and tell people to just edit or add or edit it if it's something different than user ID, because there are cases out there where it's not user ID. It's not that many, I'd assume.
But potentially it could lead to some data problems, because if a metric is based on project ID, someone migrates it, we take it as user ID by default, and then someone wants to send a new property with this event. Oh wait, even if they just keep on sending the same property, they would get different data, because previously it was counted on user ID. Sorry, previously it was counted on project ID, now it's counted on user ID. So the uniqueness
yeah, that's true. we need to generate. We need to kind of build this dictionary or a lookup map at one point, either when we migrate or do it upfront for all metrics. But
I mean, either that. So I think we, at least on the surface level, I hope I haven't completely thought this through, but I think we still have an option here. What also Michał said beforehand is between generating this separate list, because in both cases, like in Piotr's case and in Michał's case, we can either go with, we generate some kind of list and store the information there. I mean, it's something we never discussed, but I think also in Piotr's case, like that would be possible, right, Piotr? We could just generate a separate YAML file and store the information there and say, like, in some way, shape, or form, say, okay, this for this internal event, please use this and that, write this total count. So we don't put it into the public metric definitions, but we store it in some separate place that we later on remove. Versus storing the same information in event definitions or metric definitions, potentially having to duplicate it. So for example, also in a unique case, I think in theory, when we migrate an event, to internal events, or a metric to internal events, then we add the information that this is based on user ID or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then we could also add the information in the metric definition that, okay, please use the default key here, don't like the base one, don't use the one with underscore user ID. The only thing it would be that this would need to be added, also this information would then be kind of need to be added in multiple places potentially, specifically at least in 2 metric definitions, if there's like a 7-day and a 28-day one. So both of them would need to have that, I guess. And I think that goes back also to why I kind of wanted to bring this up and start the discussion on, is whether it would make sense, and maybe that's also something that, I mean, because we're already also a time that, for example, Piotr and Michał could also get together on to develop a common solution. I mean, even if it doesn't look like, even if it's like different properties and metric definitions and event definitions and so on, at least to me, it feels like we should probably stay consistent in whether we want to put this migration information within a separate file or within the metric definitions and event definitions. Otherwise, it's going to be also like mental overhead for us to realize, shit, this thing is stored in this other file. Shit, but this information we stored in the event definition and so on. Mm-hmm. That's at least my, I don't know if we can get to a point where it's like, I don't know, we use the same property or something in the event and metric definitions for all migration cases. So we just give it some like legacy event key thing and it works for all cases. Don't know if that's possible, but at least it feels to me like having a consistent approach to this will make it easier in the long term to deal with this.
So I just thinking about something. Let me load it. What if we decided to generate all the new keys? So this is only for internal events, but then we would have a Redis key alias concept. That means every time in the code, for example, in Michał's case, you'll always generate based on the properties. So let's say we get so for all the ones we migrated so far, they would all have a underscore user ID, or most of them would, because that's how most of them are. But then we would have I guess a file or some kind of a map somewhere that says, okay, this I don't know, this key underscore user ID should be mapped to key. So we basically push it as far down into as we do it just before we look up in Redis or insert into Redis.
Oh, like just before the before actually calling Redis, right? Just having
right. So it would be wait a second, we shouldn't. It's almost like a postal redirect, right? When you change your address, you still put you still kind of send the address, but then you kind of switch it just before it's put into. I don't know.
Yeah,
that
yeah,
didn't make any sense.
like a notice,
yeah.
I mean, this is just very similar to like having a list of a centralized list of legacy keys. Like the only difference is when we actually access that information, I guess.
Yeah, I was just wondering if it's kind of a conceptual.
Somewhat easier, I think.
Yeah, making it with straight up Redis keys could be more problematic during the migration, because then we would expect people migrating the events to know exactly what the old Redis key was.
But yeah, that is true. I think that could be yeah.
But that's something we can still tell them, or even like create a tiny script, right? I mean, to read it out somewhere and put it in there, because it also feels, at least right now, I like that suggestion. So if I understand it correctly, it would be one big thing. Just putting it somewhere here. So we just have this list of old Redis key. Oh no, the other way around.
Yeah, maybe the other way around, right? The code would now generate the new Redis keys.
So sorry for the formatting. I'm gonna. So the same thing over and over again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in many cases, so for example, in Mihaw's case, there would almost always be new Redis key would end on underscore project ID or underscore user ID, and the old Redis key would then be the same key without the suffix.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and in Piotr's case, it would be probably on the new keys would be more consistent. There would be basically the event names. What I don't remember what the prefix is on that, and then whatever kind of weird key they previously ended up under.
Well, for my case, it should cover it. Piotr, would it also work for your case?
I think it would. Yeah, I think so. I'm more worried about Redis HLL actually, because for Redis HLL we append like dynamically
At the week,
weeks and week numbers and so on. So not sure if this kind of one-to-one table would cut it.
we would need to send it through some kind of modifier that could take that into account.
But I assume that isn't that just kind of more or less looking for the right place in the code to do the replacement. So you because I mean at some point we also give we we calculate the key to up to a certain point, and then we add, for example, the week number and so on, right? And so you just have to do the replacement before we add the week number, rather than trying to do it afterwards. Because if you do it afterwards, it becomes more complex, because you need to take into account those. Because personally, what I like about this, I mean, definitely it could potentially be less user friendly than having it in some metric event definitions or something. On the other hand, at least it's only in one place. It seems very easy to, or comparably easy to then take that and also actually do the migrations. I think it could even be like, I don't know the performance implications of, for example, loading different YAML files. So we could even keep it in a separate YAML file for total counts and a separate one for Redis HL counts for now, just so that it's because when we migrate things, for example, when we do the actual migration, so when we move things between the keys within Redis to the database migrations, then it makes a big difference again if it's like a Redis key that has the underscore week name or something on it, or if it's a total count where you can just take the previous one, put it in, or something like that. I don't know. Maybe that also goes into detail too much. But it sounds comparably simple, and I also personally I also like the idea of storing the information once. I think that's something Miha also brought up previously with my ideas on his MR, is that it's also error prone if we would ask users to, for example, in the event definition and the metric definition, add the information that, hey, this is kind of based on an old key, or they would need to add it in multiple metric definitions. There's always the potential for someone missing one place, and then it creates weird errors, right?
We will be doing the migrations ourselves, or we're gonna ask the like groups responsible for these metrics to migrate them.
For total counts, I think it'll probably be ourselves, because it's comparably it's not that many.
Yeah.
And most of them have these kinds of or there's a bunch of places where where it's like migrating one mini framework that a group is using, and then you suddenly get, I don't know, 20 total counts out of it. So total counts more likely our own. Redis HLL, I mean, we haven't made a plan for that yet, but that feels more like something that we will ask people to do. At the same time, we also need to be prepared at any moment, even for the total counts, that someone comes along and says, I want to migrate that specific thing because I want to also get snowplow information right now. Like that we had this a bunch of times now already, that a group on its own is coming to us or is creating an MR to migrate an existing Redis HTML account without us tagging them to do it to the new system, just so that they can use the advantages of the new system, rather than like doing a separate snowplow call or something like that.
Yeah, I'm asking because if we're going to automate it and do it ourselves, then we won't have to worry about like developers needing additional context for migrating those keys, right?
Yeah. So,
but if we're gonna ask people to help us migrate, then all right, and this is a problem as well to consider.
Yeah, so you need to develop like a rake task maybe that based on a Redis key will generate the new Redis key, the old Redis key, and we'll add it to this file.
Yeah, it would be nice. Just to have something for people to easily verify that they did all the right things. And yeah, that would be nice.
I'm wondering if for Redis HLL, that if the boring solution would be that we kind of add these in a batch, just sit down for some days and do it. I mean, we know all the events, all the event names, right? So we know all the old Redis keys already. The only missing part is this thing about which property is being used. And I don't think it was, I mean, it's a lot, but I don't think it would take so long to find them all. And then we don't have to deal with it in every migration and every review. I don't know, just an idea.
Yeah, the problem with asking groups responsible to migrate these is that in some cases we're gonna wait a lot more for some groups to finish migration, and I remember like previously migrating metrics to metric definitions. We got some like coverage gaps because some groups were really lagging behind, and essentially we'd have to remind people to finish it up. So it might actually be better to do it ourselves. Just pick a day, call it a migration day, and do that all day. And
So
eventually
with this, my proposal here was not to do the entire migration ourselves, but to generate this list of the alias list ourselves. Because if we generate it, if we generate it today, and groups are migrating over the next 2 years, whatever, we wouldn't expect any new entries to be added to this alias list. And it would do no harm that the alias list is there, because it would only be activated if somebody is actually using a new key, and we kind of need to look up an old key instead.
But if for Piotr's case, they would still need
right.
to add
This was
for
Redis HLL. Sorry, only for Redis HLL. I meant.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, I mean, there the problem that I'd see is potentially that we are doing something and it's going to have its effect much later. And so if something goes wrong, so if for some reason one of us like misattributes something, and it's like it's not the user ID but the merge request ID after all or something, and then the migration fails, it's like, but at least, so I mean, Piotr, Michał, you're the ones responsible right now for these specific issues, the two ones that kind of need some solution to that. So you need to make also the implementation call. It feels like we all to get this to get the sync part here to an end. It feels like there's general agreement that from a technical point of view, this concept of having an alias list feels like a good solution. I just to add to that, I think it could also even cover this case, the one case that we're not tackling right now. But even this case where we have this mismatch between action name property and using that as a key, even there, like just a straight up alias list where we say, okay, the old key or the new key that you would use is this one based on the action or something, and the old key is the one based on the name. That's also something we could generate. So it would solve. It might need some adjustments, but the general concept, I think, can also solve more cases. It feels like transportable. Because it might be that there's also other cases which we didn't cover today, where we have this mismatch, or depending also on further developments on internal events. It feels like that there might even be more cases of something like this in the future. Something what I'm thinking about right now is if we add property and label, and that at some point we add the possibility to filter based on those, so to create a metric that filtering on those, that might also create like a new type of event name, and then implementing that again. So the repeated problem of, okay, we generate some kind of new Redis key and it doesn't match what someone was using before, but we want to continue using it to keep data consistency. The idea of just having an alias list, at least to me, feels like, okay, that's very applicable to all of those, because it's kind of a very simple solution. So from what everyone said, it feels to me like it would make sense to pursue this further if you don't say it doesn't apply to your topic at all. And so from my point of view, I'd leave it up to the two of you to figure out if it makes sense to use the same alias list in your merge requests, or use separate ones for now that we can still merge later or something. But to continue exploring that solution and then coordinating between the two of you, that it at least, even if it's using different files or something, that at least looks somewhat similar. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yep.
Cool. That's the case. I mean, sorry that this might require some rework on some of your MRs, but at least to me, this feels like it was very helpful to get this common understanding, and we have a way forward that leaves me feeling good for now. Let's see about the future, but it feels like it was a productive kind of sharing and brainstorming session. So I really appreciate everyone taking the time and doing this. And
Thank you.
Yeah, are there any open questions left? All right.
Maybe this is
Yeah.
just a suggestion. Maybe it would make sense to work, the two of you, to work on this together, kind of outside your current MRs, and merge it. I don't know if that makes sense, but kind of build in this alias functionality and merge it, and then kind of rework the MRs based on that. Just an idea, not to get too big MRs.
Yeah, I would assume that this will be what we will do, but
okay.
All right. What I would also suggest is, Jonas, after you load it, kind of put this onto the office hours onto YouTube, maybe also link them in the two issues, the video, so that we have kind of our thinking process that led to this documented. We don't need to. I don't think we need to kind of completely write it down again. As long as the video is linked there, that should be helpful enough for everyone to understand. Okay, how did we arrive at the solution we're now discussing?
Good idea.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it. Have a nice rest of the day. And if I don't see you again anymore, then Merry Christmas and Guten Rutsch and so on.
Thank you.
Thank you. See ya.